Hello Internet, and welcome to Ramblings of a Madman. I'm Alex, and I'm joined by Sean and Stuart for a shallow and probably uninformed dive into the world of unexplained mysteries, conspiracy theories, and the supernatural. How are we all doing today? Are we okay?
Great as always.
Yeah, really good, thanks, mate.
Our best lives.
I mean, it's debatable, but sure. Shilling.
Shilling.
We've done these before, I know what I'm doing. So, Ramblings of a Madman is available on pretty much every podcast platform out there. Just search for Ramblings of a Madman or Roam Podcast, ROAM Podcast. If you like what we do and you want us to do more, then we'd love if you give a rating or review on Apple Podcasts. Or you give a comment or something on whatever site you're on. And that would be lovely. Okay,
like and subscribe.
Like and hit the bell.
No, we're not doing this. No.
Right, so for the first time on this podcast, we're going to be covering a UFO sighting.
Ooh.
So it should be fun, something to mock a little bit, maybe.
So what you got for us, Alex?
So I thought we'd start close to home, being a UK-based podcast. So I thought we should talk about the Rendlesham Forest Incident, which is the most famous UFO event to have happened in the UK. The main sources for this story are from the astronomer Ian Ridpath, who has a great summary of this event on his website, ianridpath.com, and a 2003 documentary which I watched on Sci-Fi called UFO Invasion at Rendlesham, which is American and very dubious, so be wary of that one.
The bad thing is, as well, is you said it's the most famous UFO story from the UK. I've never heard of it.
I've never heard of it. Yeah, I was going to say that. I've literally no idea what you're talking about already.
I mean, is that the fact that it's been covered up so well?
Oh.
Dum, 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 dum.
Well, it's good as well, because we have no idea what we're doing going into it.
Wait, do you mean just about podcasts or just this episode?
Both.
I am not an expert in UFOs whatsoever.
I don't think anyone is, to be honest.
Google it.
Google it.
I debate that Ian Redpath, or whatever his name was, probably is an
he's
expert.
He's
got a
debunking
website.
UFOs.
Oh,
it seems to be.
Fair enough. I was going to say, if you've got a website named after yourself, you probably know your shit.
But he was like on the ground floor of this story. Like as soon as it started, he was like on it, like debunking it on the BBC and stuff. So he's like the expert on it. Right, if we're all sitting comfortably, then I'll begin. So the story starts on the 26th of December 1980. A security patrol near the east gate of RAF Woodbridge was surprised to see coloured lights through the trees of the nearby Rendlesham Forest. The objects were reportedly flickering red, blue, orange and white and descended into the forest. In the distance, the men could hear strange animal noises. Assuming it was a downed aircraft, the men went into Rendlesham to investigate. So the place we're looking at is in the vicinity of two military bases, separated by a strip of the Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk. Known as the Twins, RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge were both being used by the US Air Force during this time. So this is sort of northeast of London, if you're familiar with the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so the patrol who saw the lights consisted of John Burroughs, Jim Penniston and Edward Cabansag. As he was following the lights, Penniston noticed a large black object in the clearing. It was around 10 foot tall and 10 foot wide and stood on 3 legs. The craft looked like it was covered in fabric, but the material was smooth and hard like glass. It had no visible windows, access ports or engines. He claims to have examined the object for 45 minutes, describing the craft in a notebook and sketching hieroglyphic inscriptions he saw engraved on its side. After touching the craft, it glowed blue and without a sound rocketed off into the sky faster than he'd ever seen an aircraft move. So that's apparently a very close-up encounter with a UFO from this Jim Penniston guy.
Meth. Not even once.
And surprisingly, if you look into other UFO encounters, that's like standard description of a UFO. Like no visible windows, no like access ports, no engines. Like really smooth, but it doesn't seem to be metal. So I don't know whether he's been. 3 legs isn't usual. I don't think.
Oh.
Well, the aliens updated over time, so it's fine.
Yeah, they've gone to 4 now. It's more efficient. Right, so neither Burroughs nor Cabansag claim to have seen the aircraft. They only described moving through the trees towards an unknown light which disappeared behind a low rise in the direction of a farmhouse. The three returned to Bentwars to report their findings to Lieutenant Colonel Holt, who was their superior. In the official report, Penniston makes no mention of his encounter with the craft, later claiming that he didn't think anyone would believe him, so he left it out.
What?
Holt ordered them to speak to local police and investigate the area where the lights were the strongest. The group returned to the clearing where Penniston had encountered the UFO, and they found 3 small impressions on the ground in a triangle shape, along with burn marks and broken branches on nearby trees. There's a photo of the clearing taken by Master Sergeant Ray Gulas, which I will give you now. I stupidly didn't put it in these notes.
Also, is the other guy called Penniston?
Yeah,
he's definitely called Penis Stone, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. As soon as you said Penniston, I was like, that's definitely spelled Penis Stone.
But there is the page on earpath.com of the site, and there's a photograph of the clearing.
Okay.
And it's hard to see, but they've marked it with little sticks, and the third stick is by the far right guy's foot. It's hard to see.
Yeah. Okay. So that's where the feet
of the craft supposedly landed. And there's 2 close-up pictures further down, but they're like pretty bad. Black and white photos.
They don't really show anything of considerable shape.
No, they're just indents. They could have been made by a human foot, really.
Pretty much.
Someone digging the heels in, sort of thing.
Penniston did take plaster casts of the impressions, though. They're around 7 inches across and 1.5 inches deep. They're sort of like circular cones, like really shallow cones. So the marks aren't that significant, to be honest.
Okay.
We'll go to the 28th of December next. So the police sort of thing was done early in the 27th. And then... Oh, in fact, this is the night of the 27th of December. Lieutenant Colonel Holt was in an officer's dinner at RAF Woodbridge when Lieutenant Bruce England burst in and told him the UFO was back. A group on patrol had reportedly seen more unexplained lights in the forest. Holt rushed back to his quarters at RAF Bentwars to change and joined the men out in the forest after midnight on the 28th. So now it's on the 28th. They sat out into Rendlesham to investigate, bringing torches and a Geiger counter to measure radiation levels, so they were a bit more prepared this time. They sort of wandered through the forest for a bit, and eventually they got to the clearing where Penniston had encountered the UFO. Sweeping the area with the Geiger counter, they typically picked up readings of 0.03 to 0.04 millirentgens per hour, but in the centre of the triangle they detected 0.07. As they gathered data, they heard strange sounds from the owls in the forest, much like soldiers had heard on the 26th. Just after this, a flashing light was seen across the field towards a farmhouse. Holt describes the 5 strange flashing red lights a quarter to a half mile away. He says that pieces of the light occasionally shoot off. Later he describes 3 glowing objects in the sky, 2 to the north and 1 to the south. He said that the brightest of these stars hovered above Woodbridge for several hours. It apparently moved erratically in the sky and occasionally beamed down lights to the ground. These lights were reportedly witnessed by more than 20 servicemen. While they were searching the forest, Holt recorded a tape. The 18-minute-long recording details the investigation in real time, but the investigation took place over a couple of hours, so it's like snippets of it.
Okay.
I'll link the recording below, along with a transcript if anyone wants to listen to it. It was released in 1984 and is a second-hand recording of the original tape, so there is some background noise. The first 14 minutes are of the group examining the landing site, and the last 4 minutes are of them reacting to the lights in the forest.
Okay, so my first question, I guess, is if the lights were in the sky for several hours, why didn't they film it?
This was the 80s.
Well, they've got a picture.
They had cameras to take photos. Apparently he didn't. Apparently he didn't take any photos. These were later objects, though. The ones in the forest are a different thing, apparently.
Yeah, no, I can imagine they're 2 separate things because they're on 2 different days, right?
No, this is the same day, but it's later on in the morning.
Right. Okay.
So they followed the lights through the forest towards a farmhouse. They watched those lights for a bit, and then when they were going back to the Air Force base, he saw these 3 objects in the sky.
And is it the same farmhouse that the first guy saw the lights go towards?
Yes.
Then, so have they gone... When they got to the farmhouse then, was there any sign of lights coming from the farmhouse for any reason?
No, the lights were past the farmhouse. he said, at a quarter to a half mile away.
So it's just like a horizon thing that happens to have
yeah.
a farm in the interim.
After the clearing in the forest, there's like a big farmer's field with a farmhouse on it, and then there's another field behind that. That's basically how the area is laid out.
Okay. And you said that these locations are close to the RAF base. It's not like the RAF base could be the source of the lights in the background to the farm, is it? Or are they in different directions?
They're in different directions.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So the same day, the 28th/27th, whilst Holt and his team were investigating the lights, another group claimed to have had an unexplainable encounter. In the early hours of the 28th of December, Larry Warren and several soldiers were conducting a security sweep of the forest. 150 yards from Holt's group, Warren saw a red light descend over the field, which landed in the form of a craft. Unlike the UFO Peniston described, Warren claims that the craft shape was hard to determine, and he could only see it through his peripheral vision. So if he looked directly at it, he couldn't really make it out. He kind of had to turn to the side.
Is that because it was backlit?
Maybe.
Is it like illuminated where it's so backlit you can't quite focus on the object in the interim of the light?
Yeah, he doesn't really describe it that well. I think somewhere he mentioned it might have been like translucent, and that's why it was hard to see. But
so that's quite a different description, isn't it, from the first guy that said it was smooth like fabric?
Mm-hmm. But it gets weirder. So he then says 3 beings emerged from the UFO. They were humanoid in shape, but they had semi-translucent skin. One of them carried a strange tool. The man in command of the twin bases, Colonel Gordon E. Williams, then walked out of the forest towards the craft. Approaching them, Williams and the being stared each other down before the craft shot into the sky. The next day, Warren reported this event directly to Colonel Williams, but he laughed him off, denying ever being there.
What?
So many questions.
So many questions.
Well,
how many drugs did he take?
When you say that the craft shot off, like the way that you described it was that they stared each other off and then the craft flew off.
Pretty much.
In my head, though, the 3 humanoids would just still be standing there.
No, I think they got back.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
I'm presuming they got back in, but then would the commander of that Royal Air Force base just let them go?
Well, he might not have been able to stop them.
Well, he might not have been able to stop them, but
I don't know.
Would you?
Warren says he was pretty far away from it again, so he couldn't make it out like very well, and I think that's his excuse for not really seeing what was going on during the end bit.
Well, the description of staring something down, in my mind, is at least like 15, 20 foot away from something. Or the most, rather.
No, he wasn't staring them down. The base commander was staring them down.
Yeah, okay.
Who emerged out of the forest randomly.
Yeah, I was going to say that. It seems quite confrontational. Like, I get that there'll be natural curiosity, and maybe because of the fact that it's the unknown and they're at a military base, you might be thinking, oh, it's some sort of weird invasion on the military. But at the same time, why would you just stare it down? Like, I can imagine people would gawk at it, being like, what the flippity-doo-dah?
I know, I've just realised as well, you meant the commander appeared randomly and stared them down as if he knew what was going on. Then when he was questioned, the commander denied ever being there.
Yeah.
He did say that, beg your pardon.
He just emerged out of the forest, walked across the field to the aliens, and then just stared them down.
Okay. I literally just said that makes more sense. It still doesn't make any more sense.
It makes more sense as an event which could happen in real life, maybe. Probably not, but... I told you the story was weird.
Yeah, there's a couple of times when we just recorded for this podcast when I've just been like genuinely speechless and don't know how to comment. This is one of them.
Right, so after this happened, Holt reported the event to the UK Ministry of Defence in a single-page memo. It was titled Unexplained Lights and dated 13th of January 1981, over 2 weeks after the incident. The memo was not classified. It was released to the public under the US Freedom of Information Act in June 1983. There are several inaccuracies in the memo because Holt was relying on his memory in recalling the event, despite the fact that he had recorded the investigation on paper and on tape, which I find weird.
What? And it took 2 weeks to release it?
It did, yeah. He sat on it for a bit.
Hmm.
Now, I have it here.
It takes us to get a podcast episode out.
I know. Do either of you want to read it out?
I'll read it out if you want. So, early in the morning of the 27th of December, 1980, approximately 0300 hours, 2 USAF security police patrolmen saw unusual lights outside the back gate at the RAF Woodbridge. Thinking an aircraft might have crashed or been forced down, they called for permission to go outside the gate to investigate. The on-duty flight chief responded and allowed 3 patrolmen to proceed on foot. The individuals reported seeing a strange glowing object in the forest. The object was described as being metallic in appearance and triangular in shape, approximately 2 to 3 meters across the base and approximately 2 meters high. It illuminated the entire forest with a white light. The object itself had a pulsating red light on top and a bank or banks of blue lights underneath. The object was hovering or on legs. As the patrolman approached the object, it maneuvered through the trees and disappeared. At this time, the animals on a nearby farm went into a frenzy, and the object was briefly sighted approximately an hour later near the back gate. The next day, 3 depressions, 1.5 inches deep and 7 inches in diameter, were found where the object had been sighted on the ground. The following night, 29th of December 1980, the area was checked for radiation. Beta/gamma readings of 0.1 millirad.
I knew you were going to struggle with that. Milliroentgens. It is Roentgens.
Milliroentgens. That's not what I said. Beta/gamma readings of 0.1 milliroentgens. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Were recorded with peak readings in the 3 depressions and near the center of the triangle formed by the depressions. A nearby tree had moderate, in brackets, 0.05 to 0.07 readings on the side of the tree towards the depressions. Later in the night, a red sun-like light was seen through the trees. It moved about and pulsed. At one point, it appeared to throw off glowing particles and then broke into 5 separate white objects and then disappeared. Immediately thereafter, 3 star-like objects were noticed in the sky. 2 objects to the north and 1 to the south, all of which were about 10 degrees off the horizon. The objects moved rapidly in sharp angular movements and displayed red, green, and blue lights. The objects to the north appeared to be elliptical through an 8 to 12 power lens. They then turned to full circles. The objects to the north remained in the sky for an hour or more. The object to the south was visible for 2 or 3 hours and beamed down a stream of light from time to time. Numerous individuals, including the undersigned, witnessed the activities in paragraphs 2 and 3. Signed, Charles I. Holt, Lieutenant Colonel, USAF, Deputy Base Commander.
Yeah, so that's what he said happened. It's a bit different to what I said happened, because the story has changed a lot over the last 30 years.
I was going to call one of you out, but that does make a lot of sense.
As Holt and Peniston and particularly Larry Warren keep changing their stories to make it seem more exciting than it probably actually was.
Oh, so not Chinese whispers, it's dramatised.
Dramatised, especially since they're on documentaries and stuff, like the one I watched. The dates are a day ahead as well, like I said, because apparently he didn't listen to his tape, or he didn't write the dates down. Can't remember if the dates were in the tape or not. I think they were.
I was going to say that because you said it was on the... This says it was on the 27th, but you did say it was on the 26th.
Yeah, the first account was on the 26th.
Mm-hmm. Unless he was that pissed from Christmas, just skipped a day.
Well, maybe, but the witness statements from the first group were dated the 26th, like the very first statements they made the night of. Right, so where was I at? So we'll skip ahead a bit. So in 2010, the retired Colonel Holt signed a notarized affidavit, which is like an official affidavit, which is like an official statement if you don't know what it is, in which he summarised what had happened. He then stated he believed the event to be extraterrestrial and that it had been covered up by both the US and UK governments. In response to this, the base commander Colonel Ted Conrad refuted Holt's claims. Regarding Holt, he said, "We saw nothing that resembled Lieutenant Colonel Holt's descriptions either in the sky or on the ground, and that we had people in position to validate Holt's narrative, but none of them could. Despite this, a 1983 article says Colonel Ted Conrad recalls 5 Air Force policemen spotted lights from what they thought was a small plane descending into the forest. 2 of the men tracked the object on foot and came upon a large tripod-mounted craft. It had no windows but was studded with brilliant red and blue lights. Each time the men came within 50 yards of the ship, it levitated 6 feet in the air and backed away. They followed it for almost an hour through the woods and across a field until it took off at phenomenal speed. So, 2 years after it happened, the colonel said this is what happened, clearly a UFO encounter, and then in 2010, he completely goes back on it and said, no, it didn't happen. We had witnesses and none of them could verify what this guy's saying. He's crazy.
So what does he say to his own record then?
He has not commented on it.
So, hang on, I'm confused. You said that the Colonel Holt,
Lieutenant Colonel Holt, he was the one who led the team with the guy accountant and stuff
and
like
he
that.
was the one who made that transcript that I just read out.
Yes.
He is now refuting everything he said.
No, a different guy, Colonel Ted Conrad, who's the guy above him at the time, is refuting what Colonel Holt said. And basically Colonel Holt said that he thinks it's extraterrestrial, despite the fact that his memo is kind of a bit military and, like, not alien.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's subjective. It's not subjective. So a lot of the way that it's read is literally, well, obviously whether it happened or not is debatable, but he's written it as it was. It wasn't, I believe these to be aliens. It was just, this was a thing. It illuminated the entire forest, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I know what you mean. So why, but I get that. To me, let's say this is true, because obviously it is, that Colonel Holt wouldn't, in that report, have said, oh, this was extraterrestrial. He wouldn't have done that.
I mean,
because he was, well, he could have, but he was professional. He would have written the report professionally as the military would have written it. Yeah. That's in my head, at least. So it makes sense. I'm defending Colonel Holt because it makes sense that he wouldn't have written it with his own subjectivity.
Yeah. I think the main point I'm trying to get at with that section is that it seems like Colonel Ted Conrad has been told not to talk about it. And that's why he's saying that Holt is wrong in 2010.
Yeah, because they're still trying to cover it up.
Yeah, despite the fact that in 1983 he clearly said this was a UFO encounter, this is what the soldiers saw.
Yeah. Blah, 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 was there any evidence to support what they were saying about following it through the forest? Because I imagine if a fairly large craft of some kind is tracking its way through the forest, is it breaking branches on trees or is it floating above the trees?
They don't say.
Okay.
There isn't any evidence of it, like, going through the forest. Pennison said it landed in that clearing and then flew off. And Larry Warren said he saw a different craft in the farmer's field, which landed and then flew off.
And that's the transilluminating one. So we've got
multiple different crafts, apparently, all doing different things.
Yeah.
Right, so that's the story. What do you think could have happened? Do you reckon UFO? How likely is that?
Well, it's a bit of an odd one, isn't it? Because the account that people are giving... So there's multiple people disagreeing instantly about the account of the event, isn't there? So there's... Did you say was it 3 people that went into the forest on the day that it first happened?
Mm-hmm.
So one of them's they're all saying that they all saw lights. Is that right? But but they're all saying that they're on the horizon, whereas one of them said he could see this object up close for 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that there's disagreement immediately from 3 people who sound like they should have been in close proximity to each other as they all went to see what happened, cast doubt on it straight away. And then obviously the report changing is weird, but at the same time, they've had this weird experience, and then they've gone out there and found 3 imprints in the ground. So it's a bit weird that actually there is almost some physical correlation for what they've seen.
What you said then about them splitting up, and him examining the craft for 45 minutes is what you said right at the start, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say they did split up. surely they wouldn't have split up that much to the point
Yeah.
that they didn't find one of their colleagues examining this craft. And there was lights coming out of it at the time, right?
Mhm.
Like, come on.
I mean, I agree. It's very strange.
Yeah.
Maybe some memory wiping, Men in Black style.
That's a cop-out, isn't it? But
Pennison was worthy to retain the memories, but the other two were not.
Or he blinked as the flash went off.
Yes, all that.
I don't know.
So let me
holes
ask you-
in this. There's a lot of holes.
There are. Let me ask you then. So is the radiation significant?
We'll get to it in a bit, but no.
Okay. Because it's weird that they
Come
give
straight
us...
out and say they're very small numbers and it's not significant at all.
Fine, because I was going to say that the numbers that they give us sound small. They use words
Yep.
moderate and low.
Mhm.
But at the same time, is it just the normal background radiation for an area that's got a lot of military equipment nearby?
The fact that they measure it in millirentages per hour is a sign that the numbers are very low.
Okay.
But, I mean, to me, them measuring for radiation in the first place just sounds like we've seen a couple of sci-fi films. A lot of alien stuff is radio. No, actually, no, wait, I'll take that back. Things from space will be radioactive. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I mean, everything's radioactive slightly.
Everything's radioactive. There's, blah, blah, blah. But something that has been in space is going to be more radioactive, as far as my knowledge goes.
Sure. I can't dispute you. I don't know.
I think that's genuinely true.
It would make sense, wouldn't it? Because there's solar flares and things like that.
Yeah, there's less atmosphere to get in the way. The rays aren't being stopped by particles in the air and stuff like that. I don't mean dangerously radioactive. I just mean when they come back into the atmosphere, I'm sure they are radioactive. Obviously, they something that's literally re-entered orbit will catch on fire because it's that hot, right?
Yep.
I want to know where you're going with this.
I was going to be like,
Obviously.
well, that's why it's hot, but
What?
no, but meteors tend to be radioactive as well.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Even if the materials inside it aren't necessarily radioactive.
Sure. I don't really know.
I'm not sure.
This is like the one big piece of information that I've adamantly given as, acting like I'm an expert in something.
Okay.
So I'd really want to back this up with some kind of evidence. Hang on.
But I have none, so moving swiftly up.
Radiation in space. I'm not letting this go. I'm not letting this go.
Okay, while Sean looks up his evidence, I want to think about, so just from the story alone, before you give us any kind of weird and wonderful theories, we've got flashing lights in the distance for a recollection of events from multiple people. When I try and think of flashing lights in the distance, I've already asked you, so it's in a different direction to the RAF base. So take the RAF base out for a second. So you've got potentially crafts returning to the RAF base, which could have a light on them.
Okay.
You could have something else in the distance. Is this near anything else? Like something maybe with floodlights in the distance or a bright light in the distance of some kind? You said it's in Suffolk, right?
I don't want to spoil anything.
Oh, okay.
But
okay.
keep going. You're close.
Okay. So lights in the distance, but then something up close. I don't really understand how the discrepancy over the exact events that happened between the people immediately there. Like, how do you account? Okay, slightly related. 45. If somebody sat in a clearing for 45 minutes, what are the other people doing during that time? And how does he account for the How do they account for the 45 minutes?
I've no idea. It makes no sense.
That's what I don't get. 45 minutes is a long time.
It is a long time.
The lights being in the air for a couple of hours. That's a long time.
It is,
to do nothing about it. I know you said right, the picture that was taken, was that a day or two later?
The picture of what? Of the clearing?
Of the clearing.
That was when the police were there looking at it.
Right, okay, so that makes more sense that the police would have brought a camera. It makes sense that the army or the RAF base might not have had a camera.
Yeah.
at that time.
What? That makes less. So sorry. I disagree there. I think the military will have much more advanced equipment than the local bobbies.
No, I'm going to take that back. The military would have had much more. That's a really good point. Yeah. No, what I mean is that they wouldn't, while they were just like searching around and stuff like that, they wouldn't have had smartphones to just pop a picture. No. They wouldn't necessarily have been walking around with big films that would be able to either make a film or, I don't know, the 1980s. That's not too. Yeah, but
the US Army probably already had 5G drones flying overhead taking pictures of this.
Okay, yeah, exactly, right. They would have had the iPhone 0 by that point.
So I left this out because it's a bit of a cop out, but apparently Peniston did have a camera on him and he was snapping photos the whole time. But when he went to develop the film, all the pictures were blank. And he says it's because of the radiation. But I believe that he's completely lying and he didn't take any photos of this craft and or see this craft at all.
So just to question that, Alex. So when you say blanks, were they blank as in they are a forest with nothing in them? Or are they blank as in they're white? Or are they blank as in they've never been
So they were overexposed.
Like they've been damaged by radiation, which is a real thing. It can damage your camera film.
But I was just going to say what Sean's just said. Is it that they're overexposed and they're completely whited out because something is so bright?
I mean, it could be.
So he actually took a picture of it.
He hasn't produced these photos at any time, so we don't know.
Right. Okay.
I get the impression.
He hasn't even produced the yeah.
He's produced the notebook, which he apparently wrote in and drew pictures. It's very.
That could have been done at any time.
It could be done at any time. It is dated wrong as well. The dates follow the note that Holt wrote, so they're all a day ahead.
Well, at least they're all consistent, though. The only defense I can give is that although they're a day out to when it actually happened, his recollection of it, because sometimes you do just get the date wrong, right?
Yeah,
you always have to ask what the date is. He might have.
Yeah,
he might
have happened overnight as well, didn't it?
UFO. Well, yeah.
Sorry, I talked over you then. So it might have happened overnight there as well. Sorry, as it happened overnight, it may have been that the date moving from one day into another has just got slightly mixed up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's a photo. It's a screen grab of the documentary I saw with him showing the notebook. And you can see it's literally just like very short sentences, which is scribbled in this notebook.
What does that say? A/C clear? Cut?
Maybe.
The aircon... The clearing needs aircon. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Active current.
And he draws the craft in the notebook, and it's literally a square with 3 legs. And then later on, he does like a more detailed drawing, and it's completely different. It's got like lights on it, and
right, okay,
like a blue light on top and red lights all over it, and like it's like a sci-fi spacecraft. Now, being on his side, maybe he was like rushing, but he was there for 45 minutes, so I don't know.
There's just no way, is there? Like 45 minutes is a long time to be looking and examining something and trying to take notes and trying to take pictures.
And it said he touched it.
He did.
But as soon as he touched it, it glowed blue and flew away.
Yeah, the like hieroglyphics on it glowed blue and then he flew away.
Did he copy the hieroglyphics?
He did. They're very simple shapes. They're like squares and like an Eiffel Tower looking sort of thing.
Do they spell anything out?
No, not at all.
Well, yeah, so we haven't translated it yet. Let me go back to the radiation in space.
What we've all been waiting for.
There is genuinely radiation in space.
Oh, well, let's clear that one out. Thanks, Sean.
Right. The more that I quickly read this, the quicker I realised that, yeah, I'm going to go back and retract my statement of being an expert in this area. Because basically...
all the words got really big.
Spacecraft like the ISS and any space shuttles, anything like that, they all have to have protective casings to reflect the radiation.
Okay.
All the radiation that comes from solar flares and stuff like that. There is a lot more radiation in space because Earth's magnetic field reflects it.
Yeah.
That was what I
Nice.
was trying to get at. So there is actually genuinely more radiation in space. Whether or not the radiation they were testing for at the time is the same radiation, I don't know. Because I presume, at least in my head, there is only 3 kinds of radiation. There's alpha, beta, and gamma.
Oh, X-rays.
Is gamma. X-rays gamma,
Oh, okay.
I think. No, it's not. Right, UFOs. Back to UFOs.
Right, so we'll do some like realistic theories for the UFO because we don't seem to think it was a real UFO, do we?
I kind of want to.
You want to, but no. So the first theory I've got is that it was all a hoax, as everyone loves.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2003, Kevin Conde, a former USAF military policeman, claimed during a BBC interview that the Rendlesham Forest Incident was sparked by a practical joke that got out of hand. Apparently, a guard at the back gate was always seeing things, so Conde decided to mess with him. He drove down the Woodbridge runway in his car. He stuck a spotlight on after attaching red and green lenses. He said he drove around in circles in the fog with a PA loudspeaker going and flashing his lights. Although it's possible that this stunt actually occurred, it seems unlikely that it was the cause of the UFO investigation, however. Conde doesn't remember the date that he did this, and from his description of the weather, it doesn't seem to coincide with the 26th or 27th of December 1980. So what do you think about that?
Doesn't line up. Like, it sounds very realistic. It sounds like it could be the case. But there's no proof to disprove it.
Yeah.
As in, it's trying to disprove the original thing that the UFO was there. There's no proof.
I think the thing as well for me is that it doesn't line up with some of the other evidence that people have got. So it's saying it drove around in circles, which is fine, but that doesn't account for the fact that it supposedly stayed still for 45 minutes. It doesn't explain 3 imprints in the ground. If there had been 4 legs and you could have said that there were 4 wheels of a car, then fair enough. But why would there be 3 marks in a triangle in this field where somebody's giving an account of it? That doesn't really fit with it.
The other thing as well is in the account it said that 2 were from the north and 1 was from the south.
These were the other lights in the sky.
Exactly, yeah. So unless he had 2 other mates that were driving around doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. So going back to Stuart's point about the 3 marks in the clearing, the soldiers reported seeing lights in the forest, but Conde drove his car on the runway.
Oh, yeah.
So it would
It's
not
just the wrong direction,
be
isn't it?
related to that clearing in any way at all.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the account has occurred over 2 nights, but he only says he pulled the prank once. Doesn't discount the fact, however, that another person may have copied the prank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, true.
Maybe some inspiration, or to mess with him again, like the next night. But yeah,
then
it doesn't.
why?
It doesn't fit at all.
Yeah.
Like, it's not in the forest at all. That's the big problem with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So let's kind of go through and explain each of the big pieces of the case step by step. So the initial lights that the patrol saw on the 26th were most likely a very bright meteor known as a fireball. Fireballs are caused by natural pieces of debris from space burning up in the atmosphere. Although they occur high in the atmosphere, they appear to be much lower and often give the impression that something has plummeted to Earth nearby, such as like an aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
They also give off a range of colours as they are falling. There are records by the British Astronomical Association that a fireball was visible on Boxing Day 1980 over southern England. So, like, the very first lights they saw, while they were by the gate, could have been this fireball.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Looking like it fell into the forest.
Interestingly, that actually just jogging up a bit of science in my head, the group 1 elements from the periodic table are all sensitive to water.
Mm-hmm.
So sodium,
Lithium,
cesium,
Potassium.
lithium, francium, those lot all explode in the context of water. They all react quite vigorously. And do you remember when we in science used to burn them and they used to give off certain colors?
Mm-hmm.
As you burn the metal, it would give off a color which would fit with it going.
Yeah.
A meteor maybe with group 1 elements in it, which would be most common just because they're low atomic weight, would be consistent with a purpley or like a reddish glow.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, yeah. Because the same way with, like, if you burn copper, it's like a green flame, isn't it?
Yeah. Lithium off the top of
flame.
my head is pink.
Green flame, yeah. Yeah.
So, and lithium is the first one in group 1.
Is
So
it
it's
magnesium that's like a super bright white light?
White. It's really bright white, yeah.
Okay.
So metals burning up in the atmosphere or reacting with the atmosphere as they descend to the Earth would definitely fit with that description. I quite like that already.
Yeah. But there's two sides to that, because it doesn't necessarily explain the craft that Holt saw. The other thing as well is, like, what if every fireball is actually just a UFO?
Ah.
But technically it is, because the definition of a UFO is an unidentified flying object.
I mean, if you identify it as a fireball...
It's not a UFO anymore, yeah.
It's an IFO. It doesn't have quite the same ring to it,
Identified flying object. No, Sean, it's just a meteor. Damn it. So, with the fireball things that you're on about, is the implication that they burned up before they hit the ground?
Yeah, they burn up in the atmosphere.
Okay. So that's why they would have been... You can't argue, well, where's the crater or the impact crater or whatever, because it never did.
Yeah, I mean, they'd notice a meteor landing in the forest.
Unless there was no one there to hear it. That's what the saying is, right?
Sure.
Yeah, when the meteor falls and no one's around to hear it, doesn't make
When the
sound.
meteor falls by RAF Bentwaters
There you
and
go.
Peniston isn't in the forest, did it actually fall?
When Peniston...
Case solved.
Okay, so we're happy with the initial sighting. How about the landing site, though? So the impressions supposedly left by the UFO are most likely rabbit diggings. I mean, it's not very exciting, but...
That's so underwhelming.
It's realistic. These, as you probably understand, are marks left on the ground by rabbits or similar small animals as they're sort of like foraging about, doing a bit of a snuffle.
What kind of forest is it? Is it one that would have rabbits and small animals?
Yeah, you have squirrels and rabbits, and it's a British forest. It's one of the few bastions of British forest left.
Counter argument to that, were the markings like very evenly spaced out?
They were triangular in the clearing, but they weren't a perfect triangle. If I can,
Right,
if you've still,
so it was rabbit markings then.
if you've still got that page open with the photo
yeah.
with the landing marks, if you scroll down, a forester has drawn the marks, and they're
for God's sake, that's not.
They're sort of ovals, very small ovals, and they're not in a perfect triangle at all.
No, they're not. It's a rabbit.
I literally wouldn't have even said it was triangle.
It's not even. No, it's no. It's not. It's not even. It's not even like an isosceles. It's like the word when.
I knew you were going to say it.
Do you want to Google triangles?
It's an unequilateral triangle.
What the fuck's the word?
Not obtuse. Obtuse is not the right word. Is it?
I don't know. I don't know about triangles.
Let's do maths and geometry with Sean.
It's a square-based pyramid.
Obscene? No. What is it when a... Oh, fuck. Scaling.
Oh, yeah, it is scaling, actually.
Scaling.
Yeah.
When none of it's equal at all. When none of the lengths are the same size and none of the degrees of the corners are the same either. That's a scaling triangle.
Sure.
It looks like it's cut all that out. Those markings are in the shape of a scalene triangle. They have no correlation with each other whatsoever. It's definitely rabbit markings.
It's definitely rabbit markings.
It's a rabbit with scaling triangle feet.
So you think they're rabbit markings, right? The police also thought this, and the report they made on the 27th attributed the indentations on the ground to animals.
Okay.
So the marks on the trees, they were probably pre-existing axe marks made by local foresters to signify these trees were ready for felling. These trees were in fact cut down not long after the incident for use as timber.
Okay.
Yeah, the clearing is presumably been cleared.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just slightly bigger now or whether it's completely gone. I mean, I go with what we're doing to the planet. The whole forest is probably gone by now.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about radiation again, as we've had so much fun discussing radiation. So
I'm doing my best.
Thank God it's our specialist subject.
It's a good thing you have a radiologist. Yeah?
Yeah.
Radiologist?
Yeah, sure.
Oh my God.
A radiographer.
every statement I make, I'm like, I know everything about this, and I'll get halfway through the sentence and be like, oh, no,
halfway through the sentence, halfway through the first fucking word.
Yeah, halfway through, I'm like, wait, am I correcting this? Damn it, it's already been recorded now. I'm just gonna roll with it, try and make a joke out of it.
Right. If you listen to the actual tape Holt recorded, the guy operating the Geiger counter, and also Holt as well, seemed pretty unfamiliar with measuring radiation levels.
Like me?
Yeah, like Sean.
This radiation's from space, I think. Oh, God.
Yeah, so they're kind of looking at the machine, and they're constantly going, yeah, it's on a 5-point scale, and we're getting like a measuring of 2 or a measuring of 3 and stuff like that. Like, they don't really know what they're doing, and they say the units as millirentigens, but not millirentigens per hour. So they also don't know the right units. The typical readings that they measured of 0.3 to 0.4 millirentigens per hour are simply the normal background levels of radiation in the area. Here's some maths for you, since we love that so much. The average person is exposed to around 1 millirentigen per day. Being exposed to the 0.04 millirentigen per hour measured at Rendlesham over 24 hours would only result in a dose of 0.06 millirentigen. So less than what you get in a day, on average.
Yeah.
The highest reading mentioned on the tape is 7/10, or 0.07 millirentigens per hour, but this was a very brief spike in the middle of the triangle. It could be caused by pretty much anything, like accidentally bumping the meter, and it's not really significant at all.
Mm-hmm. One thing I found quite funny, skim reading through the transcript, just because we were on the subject of it, it goes through and they're talking to each other, and it's like, that's the, we're on the 0.5 scale. We're having trouble reading. Someone else says approximately 01:25 hours. Burst of piano music.
So that's because that's the background noise I mentioned.
Yeah,
because they're recording the tape as it's being played on a tape recorder with another tape. So it's like tapeception.
This is actually Colonel Holt's daughter.
Playing the...
Well, no. It's Colonel Holt's daughter playing
the piano.
And it's an accidental over-recording, so it's both recording.
Yeah, she took the tape and wanted to record herself play piano over the very important UFO evidence.
That's hilarious.
Oh my God.
It sounds comical.
I mean, this whole thing sounds comical, right?
Well, yeah.
So the radiation detector used by Holt's team is designed to be used to monitor workplace fields or radiation levels after sizable nuclear incidents, and is therefore not suitable for environmental monitoring at background levels. So basically the readings are too high for just like regular environmental readings. In fact, the peak measurement stated by Holt in his memo of 0.1 millirentigen per hour, which is not mentioned in the tape at all, was the bottom reading of the lowest range of the machine, so is of little or no significance. So there we go, radiation covered again.
It also says in this transcript, Ian's note, so when they get the 7/10 in the centre, Ian's note says, this is the second time they have checked the centre. There's no jump in the reading. No jump in the readings was mentioned the first time.
Yep. And that's why they might have bumped the machine or something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's get to the big theory. And Stu was getting to it before, but he didn't quite get there. He was very close, though. So, probably the most well-known explanation for the Rendlesham Forest Incident was that the flashing lights seen in the forest were actually the beam from the nearby Orford Ness Lighthouse.
Ah!
A what lighthouse?
The Orford Ness Lighthouse, that's what it's called.
Oh, right, okay.
I never thought of lighthouse. In my head, I'm not thinking that this is close to the sea.
It is, it's right by the coast.
Mm-hmm.
Got you, okay.
Yeah, but surely, nah.
Okay, well,
but that would be so rhythmical.
I'll try and convince you. From the forest edge, the top of the lighthouse can be seen through a gap in the trees. When standing in this position, the farmhouse is directly ahead, just as Holt described it lining up with the UFO. So, here's another link for you.
Okay.
Of a photo from the forest to the farmhouse with the lighthouse circled.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Counter argument. That's not going to be the first time they've worked on that That
I have
base.
answers for all this. I have answers for all this.
Okay. So my counter argument then, just in full, is there's no way in hell, after working there, that they would not have seen that before. And also, lighthouses are usually white, not red and blue and whatever.
I still have answers.
Yeah, okay. So those are my first things that popped into my head. So go ahead.
So we'll go back to the police. In the report, they mentioned that the only lights visible were from the lighthouse, so it's very likely the lighthouse is visible from within the forest. And they were also a lot more familiar with the local terrain, so they knew the lighthouse was there. Halt tape also provides evidence that the lighthouse was the culprit. In the recording, an airman says the light appears every 5 seconds, and this is the same rate at which the Orphan Nest lighthouse flashes.
Okay. Okay.
Because of the way the bulbs turn.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Once he had traversed the field, Holt notices the light again and says it's clear off to the coast, right on the horizon. He also estimates that the bearing to the light was about 110 degrees. The actual bearing from the forest to the lighthouse is 99 degrees, but since he was estimating the angle, an error of 11 degrees isn't that significant.
So what about the colour?
In time, my Padawan.
I need it now.
So regarding the multiple lights that the airmen reported, if the light was sweeping across the forest while also flashing, it would appear as if several lights were there due to the trees blocking the beam. And also, if the beam reflected off low clouds, it could cause strange visual effects. And since it was at night as well, and they only had like little flashlights, it would be a lot more disorientating.
So just a quick question about this. So at the very, very start of this, so where were they when they first saw the light?
They were at the East Gate, which is, I think, sort of like towards the middle of the 2 bases. If you imagine there's the 2 bases and a strip of forest between them.
So why could they see the light from the base when they would never have noticed that before?
Because it was the fireball, which you've already talked about.
So you're saying that both of them happened at the same time?
Yes.
Oh, so the fireball drew them out, and then once they were out, they then saw the lighthouse?
Yes.
Right, okay. Okay, yeah, I can kind of get behind that.
And to sort of reinforce that point a bit further, and also to say why they weren't aware of the lighthouse, due to the contours of the land, the beam from the lighthouse was only visible until you were well into the forest. A lot of these soldiers had only just got there. They'd only been there a couple of weeks.
Yeah, they won't have leave. They won't be given much
and
leave because they're in a foreign country.
They're staying on base most of the time. They probably go into the forest every now and then to do like a routine patrol, but a lot of them weren't even aware the lighthouse existed.
Okay.
Yeah. As soon as I said, like, how would they not know or whatever, the lighthouse was there, like, they might literally just not be local, which on a military base, chances are they wouldn't.
I mean, they weren't. They were American.
That's not local.
No, it's very far from local.
No, I'm not an expert in geography, but I do know that America is not in England.
Just to ask the question, Al. So, before you talked about the guy that drove his car around, and you said the conditions that day didn't match up with the conditions that you'd expect on the 26th of December. So, on the 26th of December, if we're suggesting that perhaps low clouds were responsible for some of the altered perception of the light in the sky, what was the weather like on the 26th of December? Was it a clear sky or was it cloudy?
So, the point from that is the fact that the guy in the car said it was foggy, and there's no mention of fog in the witness statements that they wrote. Now, I don't know what the actual weather was like, but there definitely wasn't fog.
Okay.
Or if there was fog, they didn't mention it.
I was going to say, because if it was foggy, that would actually make me put more credit to what they were saying, because fog, if you've ever driven in the fog, a sudden pair of lights coming towards you when they're pointing at you is
blinding,
quite unnerving, isn't it? And quite, it gets scattered quite a lot. But when the lights aren't looking straight at you, they do almost just seem invisible.
Were you implying with the clouds thing as well, Alex, that would affect the colour?
It just says it could cause strange visual effects, so maybe colour would be a thing.
I wonder if it's like the whole refraction thing.
Yeah,
like it could have just refracted and he happened to be stood in a position that gave him a certain wavelength of light as he was looking at it,
Mm-hmm.
for example.
That's possible, but
It's just a way to explain why the descriptions are so different between the soldiers of the lights.
Okay. Yeah.
So to explain the different colours that the MO reported, scattering in the atmosphere causes reddening of light, and the incandescent bulb used in the lighthouse in 1980 could result in a yellow or orange beam under certain conditions.
Mm.
Now,
Okay.
I haven't seen that exact study, but I think someone's actually worked it out that
Or theorized it.
the specific bulb they used during that time could be yellow or orange under certain conditions.
Okay, that's a bit more grounded to me than just the clouds make it look different. You know, like it having an actual specific bulb does make more sense.
Yeah. So the last piece of the puzzle is, what were the 3 objects in the sky that Holt saw at the end of his recording? From the positions that Holt gives in the recording, these are most likely actual stars, which again is another massive cop-out and very boring.
No, but sometimes it's the right answer.
It is, yeah.
Sadly.
The northern objects can be identified as the first magnitude, or the brightest stars in the night sky, Deneb and Vega, and the southern object could be Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. There are 2 problems with this identification, however. Holt described the objects moving in sharp angular movements, displaying different colours, and he also said the object beamed down lights to the ground every now and then. These, however, can all be explained by various visual effects. The autokinetic effect is the phenomenon in which a stationary small point of light in a dark environment appears to move.
Okay.
And especially if he's staring at it through a magnitude scope, which he was, that would compound the problem. The light of stars being reflected by the atmosphere causes them to twinkle many different colours, an effect most noticeable when they're near the horizon, which they were like 5 or 10 degrees off the horizon.
Yeah.
And also, looking at bright objects causes dazzle in the eye, which can give the impression of beams. Since Holt was looking at the stars through binoculars, or a focused monocular sort of thing, then this effect would become even more apparent.
Yeah, because it would have been refracted.
Yeah.
I just had the idea then of this guy looking avidly at the sky through his monocle.
His monocle. He's got a zoom monocle. It's like zoom to zoom in.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, so kind of a bit of a not funny ending, but I mean they're the explanations for this strange UFO appearance.
Well, that's not necessarily the answer.
No, it seems reasonable to infer that chain of events accounts for things, doesn't it? But it is...
Yeah, it does sound quite conclusive, but
You're not buying it.
To counter
I'm buying it.
Yeah, I am buying it, but to counter it, this is an RAF base, right? So will they have a radar tower?
Yes, they did.
So did anything get picked up?
Now, on Ian Redpath's website, he says that nothing was picked up by the radar tower. But in the documentary, the dubious documentary I watched, they said something was picked up by the radar tower.
Ooh.
Okay. I tend to agree with Ian more than the Sci-Fi Channel.
What did it say was picked up?
Just a blip. A very small blip.
That would correlate to the position?
They didn't say.
Okay.
Just a blip in the forest, I guess.
But if it's travelling that quick...
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe it's like anti-radar technology as well.
Well, that's what I mean, yeah, because radar implies that it's finding stuff that was known to be possible at the time or whatever. But again, like you said, the military were able to make anti-radar technology. So what's to say that UFOs couldn't?
I mean, there's no limits with UFOs. They can be anything.
Oh, exactly.
If you imagine it, it can be a UFO.
Well, I imagine it to be like a square with 3 legs.
Yeah, a very crude.
I imagine it to be a scalene-based pyramid with legs.
You never know what you're going to get.
Nope.
The only... So, to be honest, it is quite conclusive in my head. The way that you've described it and the information that's been given, but also the way that you've kind of implied it, if you know what I mean, like the way you've told it.
Yeah. I will say
It's
that
quite conclusive.
because I used Ian Redpath's website as the source for it, it's very biased towards it not being a UFO.
The defense I have for Holt making the statement, though, and if there's any, to be honest, if there's any listeners in the military or who have knowledge of it that can comment, to me, making that kind of a statement officially as a military report, basically, I'm just disputing whether or not he genuinely saw it, whether or not he genuinely believed it happened, that kind of thing. Because if he's put that report in, he's now got to like back that up for the rest of his life. In my head, at least, like making that kind of report, because it's an official document now. You know what I mean? So for him to, what I'm saying is, like, if it is made up, maybe it's not malicious. Maybe he genuinely saw this sort of thing or something.
No, I don't think it's made up at all. I think it's just something that can be explained with realistic events.
So you think that Colonel Holt saw that UFO that as he described in the clearing?
No, that was Jim Penniston who saw the UFO. Holt was on the second night. They went to the clearing with the Geiger counter, took some measurements.
Yeah. No, I meant Penniston. So Penniston's seen this, recorded it, whatever. How do you explain that?
So the original statement Penniston made the night of does not mention that at all. He just says that they followed the lights through the forest, the same as the other two.
Right, so he's lying then.
And then supposedly in the next 2 weeks he's told Holt the story, and then Holt put it in the report.
Nah, it's all
and also over the years it's gotten more and more crazy, the story.
Yeah, you've got good like physical evidence to back up disclaiming it, and the way that it's been reported is bullshit.
What did the police
make
of What did the police make of it at the time, Al? Was there an official report?
Yeah. It's basically just said, we were led to the clearing by the soldiers. They showed us marks on the ground which were probably from animals, and the only lights we saw were from the lighthouse.
Okay.
That was basically
was there ever a military statement afterwards?
No.
Obviously, it happened on a military
Besides
area,
that memo that Holt wrote, that's the only written statement about the event.
I wonder if it was ever acknowledged.
I mean, that's a big question, isn't it? It seems to be, from my research, it seems that Holt's memo wasn't taken seriously and it was put in a filing cabinet somewhere and left for, 3 years until it got released.
Okay, yeah, I was confused in that then. So it wasn't like an official documented report.
I mean, it was an official report, but I did say it wasn't classified in any way at all.
Yeah.
He sent it to the UK Ministry of Defence, and from what I understand, they skimmed it over and then put it in a filing cabinet.
Which is basically the shredder.
Basically. Or the US government is lying, and they took it very seriously. And it's all a fabrication.
Too serious.
And they knew the aliens were in the land, and that's why they told the colonel to go out into the forest and make first contact.
Mm-hmm.
And they discussed important information while they were staring each other down, and Larry Warren happened to not hear it because he was so far away.
Or it was telepathy.
Yes, or telepathy.
Because it's an alien.
That's always an option.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the strange tool they had was a peace offering. It was like a cool technological bottle opener.
I just have the idea that they go, oh my god, look at this invention that we've brought from outer space. You'll never believe it. It's a fork and a spoon attached together. Like, oh yeah, we've already got a spork. And they're like, what the fuck can fly off?
Yeah, but this one's like shiny and shit, and it vibrates
it's a
for
shiny
some reason.
spork.
It's more efficient than being a spork.
It's a handheld milk skimmer. Oh, thanks, guys.
We've been rumbled, flies off.
We've been rumbled, yeah.
You're a phony. You went to Asda. Yeah.
Ramblings of a Madman is currently available on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify and YouTube. All the links are available on Twitter at Roam Podcast. That's ROAM Podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.